Shabbat Shalom. I was speaking this week with a conversion student who was shocked by some of the horrors in the Torah. Explicit deceit, sexual violence, often within a family, bloodshed. I told him that when I assign Torah portions to 12-year-olds and their parents, I always warn them, whatever you think, this is not a G-rated text. This is not the kind of stuff you would permit your children to see on the screen. And then they might ask, so why are you giving it to them to read in synagogue? The answer is because that's what we do as Jews. We don't turn away. This week's double portion Matot Ma'aseh includes one of the most disturbing episodes in the entire Torah. An episode so disturbing that I questioned if I should mention it at Shabbat services, because I want Shabbat to be a salve and the sanctuary that it is meant to be. But it is in the Torah. And when we gather on Shabbat, we read and we study Torah. We do not turn away. We read about the war in Midian. It is 1 chapter and 54 verses of devastation. God commands Moses to take vengeance on the Midianites for leading Israel away from the covenant and deep into the morass of idolatry. And the officers, the fighters of Israel carry out this order. Every adult male is killed. Women and children are taken captive. Every leader is slaughtered, including Balaam, the prophet who once blessed Israel. When the troops return from battle, Moses, instead of expressing gratitude, expresses rage. You didn't go far enough. He commands them to kill every single woman who has enticed Israelite men sexually into idolatrous practices, and then he demands that they kill kol zachar bataf, every male child, every little one. And the soldiers obey. This is not the Judaism we practice. This is not the Judaism we want our 12-year-olds to inherit. This is not the Judaism that teaches compassion, that teaches the infinite worth of every single human being. This is not the Judaism that teaches us to resist from acting out of rage, to restrain our instincts towards violence and vengeance. So what are we to do with a text like this? One approach is to see it in its historical context. That is a place we often go. We understand that the ancient world lacked the idea of universal human rights, even though it did have practices of moral ethics. This was thousands and thousands of years before the Geneva Convention. What we now call war crimes were then accepted norms. Does that satisfy the parent of the 12-year-old whose child is asked to read these words from the Bima? Some early Reform rabbis believed that we could and should omit these sections from our readings. But Rabbi Jerome Molina, one of my most beloved professors of homiletics, rejected that idea, demanding from me and my classmates, we must read every single word. And to those that offend our moral conscience, to those that contradict our understanding of what Judaism's principles are and must be, we must raise our voices and say, this is not us, even when it bears the name of Moses. Now, Rabbi Molina could do that because while he and other classical Reform Jews like him did not see the Torah as a historical text, but as a sacred one, they also did not necessarily believe that it was the word of God. So what about everyone else, all the other Jews for the thousands of years that we have been reading and teaching and cherishing Torah? There is an answer for that satisfies me, and that satisfies me enough to share with the parents of those 12-year-olds. You see, the rabbinic tradition, which sees every word of Torah as sacred, doesn't shy away from these texts either, and doesn't apologize for them. The rabbis taught that alongside written law, God gave us the oral law, a tradition of interpretation that lifts up justice and mercy and moral responsibility, even in the darkest of stories. They breathe life into the black ink on the white parchment by allowing us to weave the Torah that sustains us and sustains life into our constantly developing world. Over time, through this system of interpretation and Jewish life, the rabbis developed a framework for ethical warfare, not an oxymoron, because sometimes war is necessary, but it is never meant to be waged without constant alertness to how it is being waged. Here are a few basic principles. Seek peace first. We read in Deuteronomy, when you draw near to a city to fight it, implying that that city has already committed some kind of offense, and we are justified in terms of approaching it with war, that first we must offer terms of peace. War must always be a last resort. Pursue peace always. Bakesh shalom v'radfehu, seek peace and pursue it. That is spoken in the present tense, implying that even in the midst of conflict, we are obligated to strive for a peaceful end. The goal of war is not victory. The goal of war is to stop harm and restore security. No matter what the circumstance, that is the goal. Practice restraint. Violence must stop when threat is neutralized. Continuing to fight when it's no longer necessary violates our core value of rachamim, of compassion, and our commitment to pikuach nefesh, to preserving all life. Protect civilians. Maimonides ruled that in discretionary wars, meaning wars that are not decided by God, but by us, that non-combatants must be spared, especially women and children. The idea that everyone is an enemy to be feared, no matter how young, flies in the face not only of our Jewish teachings, but of human decency. Do not destroy vital resources. In a very interesting verse in the Torah, we are told that we are forbidden to destroy fruit trees in war. Think of all the things that get destroyed in war. Fruit trees must be protected. They provide nourishment. This is a teaching that grew into broader protections for all life-sustaining infrastructures. Even enemies need and deserve to be able to have the basics to survive. Leave an escape route. The Midrash on this week's portion says that the Israelites left one side of Midian open so that civilians could flee. The great commentator Nachmanides writes about this: "From here we learn to act with compassion even towards our enemies." Reject vengeance. While the Torah speaks of vengeance as a motivator for war, the rabbis insist that vengeance belongs to God and not us. Whatever we are feeling, we are not allowed to act on our desire for revenge. We must make sure that our actions are driven by justice, and no matter how hard it is, that means applying deliberation and restraint. We must not be led by emotion. Acknowledge the toll of war. In this portion, soldiers were required, after battle, to undergo purification, recognizing that war leads deep spiritual as well as physical wounds. We must limit and treat the inner battles that continue to rage in soldiers long after the battlefields lie quiet and we return to our lives. The war still rages within them. Free captives. Pidyon Shavim, the redemption of captives, which we pray for every Friday night here as a congregation, every Saturday morning here as a congregation, which I know so many of us pray for every single day. This is a wartime priority and must be for those who are controlling the war. It is named by the Talmud as one of Judaism's greatest mitzvot. A captive is considered to be one of the most vulnerable and dependent upon us for care. And we must respond. To delay freeing the captives, Maimonides declares, is akin to shedding their blood. Do no harm does not apply to captives. If we are not involved in redeeming them, in freeing them, in bringing them home, we are shedding their blood. These values offer very clear guidance, very clear directives as to what we must value and how we must comport ourselves in general. Of course, applying them is never simple. How do we define self-defense? How do we measure risk? Sometimes it is really difficult, sometimes impossible, to distinguish civilians from combatants. How do we know when an enemy's call for peace is genuine? How do we know? I don't know. As far as I perceive, most of us, if not all of us, are not generals, are not politicians who can come closer to making those deliberations. But that does not free us. That does not free us from being involved in the war that is raging. We are involved. Whether we scroll by or don't, whether we sign a petition or don't, whether we blast information in rage on Facebook or don't, whatever we do, we are a part of it. The best way to understand that is through a very famous poem by the Israeli poet Yehuda Amichai himself, a soldier of 4 wars, who opened for us the window into recognizing that the devastating price of war is often a greater price than we should be paying. This is his poem, The Diameter of the Bomb. The diameter of the bomb was 30 centimeters, and the diameter of its effective range about 7 meters, with 4 dead and 11 wounded. And around those in a larger circle of pain and time, 2 hospitals are scattered and 1 graveyard. But the young woman who was buried in the city she came from, at a distance of more than 100 kilometers, enlarges the circle considerably. And the solitary man mourning her death at the distant shores of a country far across the sea includes the entire world in the circle. And I won't even mention the crying of orphans that reaches up to the throne of God and beyond, making a circle with no end and no God. Amichai, not only a Zionist, but a founding Zionist of the state of Israel, one of its soldiers who loved Israel so much that he took the name Amichai, my people live. He dares to speak the unspeakable, knowing that we have to listen because we are reading his words. And if we are going to read and hear his words, let us pay attention. We ask it of our 12-year-olds. We must ask it of ourselves. Amichai knew personally of war's devastation and how it spreads far beyond targets, shattering lives and casting grief across borders and through generations, sometimes growing so wide, and I would argue that now is that time that it encloses all of us in its circle, casting God, even God, beyond reach. So what can we do? Our task is to draw God back in, to ask ourselves today and tomorrow and the next day and the next, what are the goals of this war and what is the price? Are its tactics upholding the respect for life that Judaism demands? Is this war bringing us closer to peace or pushing peace further away? Are we protecting life or are we hardening ourselves to it? Are we losing God? And perhaps most essential, are we losing our godliness? May we all, each one of us, part of this magnificent tradition, which acknowledges human frailty and vulnerability, which says God is in the messiness and ugliness, and so we cannot remove ourselves from it, which demands that we seek peace always, even in fear, even in danger. May we all have the courage to face this moment with clarity and with compassion, to act from a place of deep love for Israel and for all humanity. May we ask ourselves, am I creating space for God's presence?